contact?
No contacts.
Radar, sonar, contacts?
The amount of research and information that had to be both discovered and utilized in order to mount something of this scale with this much specificity and detail required certainly years of research.
It's a pretty unwieldy story and difficult to tell. A lot of technical detail, a lot of production problems. There are no submarines of that period available. It's a very, very ambitious piece.
Ready for firing sequence.
Fighter Missile 3.
We're all quite familiar with some of the recent submarine movies, and so it was less, going back over and studying them and knowing what they were, and the obvious benchmark of Das Boot, trying to strive for something like that, and keeping it much more organic than some of the other movies.
The biggest challenge on this movie, and where I've tried to concentrate as much of my effort as possible, was just research on this movie. Fortunately, I have a team that they will dig as deep as they need to dig to get the correct information.
Mr. Adamov has got pictures how it is done, and all the devices, all the instruments, and all the parts.
That would be extraordinary. We had the great benefit of two terrific production designers, Callie Gillison and Mike Novotny. And through wonderful resources and wonderful advisors and great support, we were able to get the actual blueprint for the K-19 itself. And so we built those sets to the exact specifications of the real K-19 with all the details, all of the equipment. And we were painstaking with the kind of detail that we gave those sets in order to achieve the kind of reality that we were looking for.
It's like a detective story. You get a little bit there and a little bit here, and it's like, making a puzzle, and it has to do with patience, and it came together, in my opinion, quite accurately.
We made a couple of trips to Russia for research and for location scouting.
Where was the repair made specifically?
А где были вот те, кто занимались ремонтом?
As you
They
say.
were on the lid of the reactor.
On
here.
the lid of the reactor.
Yeah.
Right. One thing that I think was so important for both of us was actually visiting the K-19 itself. We met in Moscow when we were in the height of pre-production. And there we were invited, actually the first Western civilians to be invited to the naval base at the Kola Peninsula. And there it was, and we actually stood on the K-19 in probably 25 degrees below zero weather in this sort of February, like cobalt blue sky in the middle of the day. It's an incredible experience.
I think those kind of experiences on the Scout, and going to this base and seeing the patina of the walls inside the barracks, seeing the shape of the boat and the aging of the boat, the quality of the light that you saw when you were there, all kind of set up visually like a style that wanted to happen.
Captain on the CCP.
Please, Captain.
I tend to try to physicalize rehearsals in every film, and especially this one. I think no film demanded it more than perhaps K-19. And I wanted to give these boys both a sort of mental muscle memory of what it would be like to be in a kind of life or death situation.
None of us can learn exactly how to operate a submarine. I mean, that's absurd. I mean, look at this. So you don't want to randomly grab a dial and start turning it, but we have technical advisors that help us out. So your actions, which you usually determine as an actor, are kind of set out for you by other people.
He could give order to the guy who stayed in the control board. Switch off.
He says it there.
My job by myself, it's trying to make some sense of historical truth as it was considered by Russian naval officer.
He's been a tremendous help in getting us a good feel, an authentic feel for the sub. We rely on him for everything from getting every bit of graphic correct to spelling mistakes, that sort of thing, to torpedo loading, to how a reactor would work, to how the captain would operate on the central command. These are all things we rely on Sergei for.
It's a great burden, and it's very hard to be responsible. But I'm trying to do, and sometimes I'm satisfied.
Catherine and Harrison just built a great rapport with Sergei when we were in St. Petersburg, and he had a very, very easy way of communicating to us, not only procedures, but more of the subtler ways of how life was on a sub in those days.
On the first 2 or 3 weeks, it was a special training course in Halifax to put them not only in the atmosphere, but as adequate members of the real submarine crew. Because you know that the main difference from the surface ships was the brotherhood and the friendly relations with a special skill of submariners.
It turned them into a crew. And from literally, you're talking about a matter of days, they became so close with one another. I mean, they're friends now for life. And that's what they brought to the set.
I can't ask enough questions, exactly. I want to talk about the Navy then, I want to talk about the Navy now, I want to talk about like our Navy versus the Russian Navy. I can't learn enough, essentially. It's not enough time.
I would say our submarine is as close of a replica as anybody's ever seen and will see of a Soviet nuclear submarine from that period.
The movie K-19, but it depicts a real K-19 and very closely, because I was in the real K-19 when I was a naval cadet in 1970.
We are recreating an era which happened 50 years ago almost, the 60s in Russia. And I thought you would just go to Russia and find everything you needed. But it wasn't so simple. I mean, they've been incredibly efficient getting rid of all this stuff. And I mean, if you needed a certain item, there was this one factory in Siberia that made it, and that factory closed down 5 years ago, so you can't get that item. So we have recreated a lot here in North America, and we have sort of been scrounging and gathering in Russia all of the things we needed.
In order to do the sequence in the reactor compartment, I needed to know about nuclear physics. And as we began, I had a nuclear physics expert who was from Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And he told us about the Cherenkov effect, which is that kind of otherworldly blue light that takes place when a reactor is beginning to melt down. Now, how do you replicate that on film?
We experimented with several things, you know, and ultimately, and ironically, because many of us have spent a great deal of time in the hotel bars at night, knew that gin and tonic has quinine in it, and quinine, when hit with ultraviolet light, glows blue. So through a series of tests, you know, we came up with the idea that we could add quinine to water and use UV lights and then get this blue hue. And the reason why it's such an unorthodox approach is you didn't want to have blue light contaminating actors in a submarine that's unmotivated, and you don't want to have colored water that is not really translucent and then stains clothes and skin when it gets on it.
This was the result of literally months of research, because the last thing we wanted was something that looked like, you know, that it was just like a music video or something.
In the interest of trying to cut costs, we decided to get concentrated quinine powder and add it to water. And the morning of the shoot, you know, with your whole cast ready to go, it didn't work. And ultimately, the only thing that did work is true tonic water. And so we ended up 700 bottles of tonic water, you know, rapidly pouring them in, throwing them, you know, this chaos of tonic water, and then came up with this really interesting light effect.
Even though there was probably 5 years between the point when I first heard about the story and shot that sequence, you'd think that you might become a bit immune to it. I could not. I remember sitting in that compartment and the hatch opens and out comes Christian Camargo in his radiation makeup, and he's shaking and he can there's sweat on his face. And there were tears coming down my face, and I know I was shooting it, I know it was a set. There's the crew, there's the cast, there's the lights and equipment. But suddenly it came to life, and I realized it was the recreation of these men making this profound sacrifice for us. People they didn't know, generations that would come after them, and if they didn't do what they did, who knows where the fate of the world would be. And then, of course, I returned to the moment and probably looked at Jeff, and we both probably exchanged tear-filled eyes and then said cut, but it was a really moving experience.
Request permission to carry out reactor repair, Comrade Captain.
Permission granted. We want to be faithful as much as possible to the truth of what happened and to the truth of human nature. May God be with you. And we also want to make a movie, an entertaining, engaging, emotionally compelling movie. And the way you do that is piece by piece, each day, slogging away and trying to get the best possible result from each detail of the story.
And not compromise at any point for any reason. That was, I think, our collaborative and collective goal every single day on the set.